So the EU Commission is suing Meta for violating the Digital Services Act, and they're actually going to be suing them for a lot of money. So the EU Commission, as trashy as they are actually saying that Meta is failing to prevent children under the age of 13 from accessing Instagram and Facebook. The ruling exposes the company to fines of up to 6% of its global revenue and intensifies international regulatory pressure on digital platforms regarding child protection. So basically, AI ID age verification. Now, 6% of its global revenue is actually quite a lot of money. That would be 6% of the $201 billion that Meta made in 2025, which would actually be about $12 billion. Now, honestly, Meta should get fined a lot more than that. But usually whenever these companies are getting fined for doing the horrible things that they do, they usually get fined something along the lines of like maybe $50 million, $100 million, hell, even $500 million. And that sounds like a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of these gigantic big tech companies, that's like nothing to them. They can make that type of money back really, really quickly. So a fine of $12 billion is quite a lot, but it should be more. And honestly, to really dissuade these companies from doing all the crappy stuff that they do, these guys should get fined somewhere in the realm of hundreds of billions of dollars, in my opinion. The commission suggests that these systematic failures occurred because Meta disregarded evidence regarding the psychological vulnerabilities of young children. So they're doing the whole argument of social media is bad for kids again, without taking into account the fact that parents should be watching their kids and making sure that they aren't going on social media too much. That is what parenting is. But no, they're going to keep pushing for ID age verification. Now, this case I do find pretty funny and kind of weird because Meta is actually the company, and they've been revealed to be the ones actually lobbying for ID age verification around the world to begin with. But now the EU Commission feels like they're not doing a good enough job, and this was actually a 2-year investigation. Our preliminary findings show that Instagram and Facebook are doing very little to prevent children below this age from accessing their services. This preliminary determination follows a formal investigation that the EU Commission initiated on May 16, 2024. The investigation focused on whether the corporation fulfilled its obligations under the DSA to identify and mitigate risks to minors. So I'm not really sure how early on Meta has actually been lobbying for ID age verification, but this might have been before they've been starting to do it, which actually makes more sense. Regulatory authorities analyzed risk assessment reports, internal correspondence, and platform data to determine the efficacy of safety protocols. Findings indicate that about 10 to 12% of children under the age of 13 in the European Union access these platforms despite official terms of service prohibiting such use. The regulatory pressure in the region aligns with an increase in litigation within the US and other countries. By other countries, they mean pretty much every other country around the world. In March 2026, a civil jury in New Mexico found Meta liable for violating consumer protection laws. The jury determined that the corporation failed to protect minors from sexual exploitation and ordered a payment of $375 million in damages. It's so funny that they brought this up. This is exactly what we were talking about earlier. Meta and other companies that are doing wrong stuff, they have actually been fined before in court, but when you get fined only $375 million and you make $200 billion in revenue in 1 year, this fine is not going to stop Meta from doing all the bad stuff that they do. In fact, it's just a slap on the wrist. It is such a minor punishment. So I'm looking forward to these companies that are doing all this shady stuff and tracking all your information to be getting fined somewhere in the hundreds of billions of dollars. But anyways, more than 40 state attorney generals have filed lawsuits alleging that Meta designed addictive features that contributed to a mental health crisis among adolescents. The commission identifies 3 primary areas where Meta failed to comply with the DSA: age verification mechanisms, which again is ironic because Meta is now funding age verification, reporting tools, and scientific risk assessment. Current registration processes on Instagram and Facebook rely on self-declared dates of birth. So basically those prompts where they say, are you over 18? You have to be over this certain age before you can go on this website. And everybody, even the kids, obviously say, yeah, I'm over this age. The European Commission notes that minors can easily enter false information to bypass restrictions because effective verification controls do not exist. To address this, the Commission suggests that technology companies must adopt age estimation tools that are accurate, robust, and non-intrusive. Notice how the EU Commission is heavily arguing in favor of this ID age verification thing and trying to collect the biometric data of everybody around the world. But in reality, the EU Commission's age verification app that they designed themselves has already been hacked twice, and it is terribly designed. It is not secure at all. And now they're going to be going ahead and trying to take the high ground on these companies like Meta, saying, oh, you guys are in the wrong and we're just trying to protect kids. Man, both parties involved, the EU Commission and Meta, suck. They're both actually trying to collect the biometric data of everybody around the world. Meta is just collecting data of people using their website in general. And I just find it so funny that the EU Commission is trying to play like the holier than thou, like, oh, we're just trying to protect the kids. Yeah, right. If you wanted to protect the kids, maybe make your horrible app that you're making a little bit more secure, or even better, just allow parents to parent their children and stop trying to collect everybody's information by having them hand you an ID. Gosh, it is so annoying how these companies try to take the high ground. But anyways, and it even gets mentioned in this article, the European Commission is developing an age verification application to provide a standardized framework for the industry. Yeah, you might want to point out that this application is absolutely awful and has already been breached multiple times. This application would allow users to prove their age without sharing excessive personal details with private platforms. platforms. Oh, really? Yeah, okay. Anyways, furthermore, the mechanisms for reporting underage users are described as complex and ineffective. Users must navigate 7 clicks to reach the reporting form, which does not automatically populate with the data of the account being reported. The European Commission adds that even when users report underage accounts, the platforms often fail to provide adequate follow-up, allowing the accounts to remain active. This lack of enforcement suggests that the terms and conditions of the corporation serve as written statements rather than actionable safety protocols. The investigation also argues that Meta performed an incomplete and arbitrary risk assessment. The European Commission asserts that the corporation ignored established scientific research indicating that young children are more susceptible to cyberbullying, grooming, and age-inappropriate content. The DSA requires that platforms of this scale must proactively mitigate these risks to ensure a high level of privacy and safety. You want Meta to have a high level of privacy and safety? No, that's not going to happen. The European Commission suggests that Meta must reform its methodology. If the European Commission confirms these preliminary findings, Meta could face a non-compliance decision that includes significant financial sanctions. They're talking about that whole 6% thing that we were talking about, which ends up exceeding over 12 billion US dollars. Additionally, the Commission can apply periodic penalty payments to compel the corporation to implement corrective measures immediately, meaning Meta could actually lose more than $12 billion here if they don't actually do what the EU Commission tells them to do. The New Mexico trial, scheduled for May 4, may complicate matters for Meta, as it could result in court-ordered mandates for the company to alter its operations, such as requiring effective age verification and the removal of known predators. Meta executives knew their products harmed children, disregarded warnings from their own employees, and lied to the public about what they knew, says Raul Torres, Attorney General of New Mexico. Arturo Bejar, sorry if I'm saying that wrong, former engineering director of Meta Platforms, says that he warned executives about sexual solicitations on Instagram. He adds that the personalized algorithms intended to drive advertising revenue also facilitate contact between predators and vulnerable minors. Similarly, Brian Boland, former vice president of partnerships at Meta Platforms, says that safety was not a priority for executive leadership when he departed the corporation in 2020. You can say that again. After we've seen everything that Meta has been exposed for recently, Meta does not give a crap about the safety of their users. And James Grayson, the chief deputy attorney general of the New Mexico Attorney General Office, says that corporations must now account for the social and psychological outputs of their algorithms as part of their compliance strategy. So obviously, as I've mentioned before, I am glad that the EU Commission is taking action against Meta, but the EU Commission is full of crap themselves. They are pushing age verification down everyone's throats, and they definitely want to do it through their awful app, which we've already exposed, has been breached multiple times. Now, Meta themselves, as we've discussed before, has already been exposed for being the ones that are actually paying for all the ID age verification laws throughout the world. There's a big long Reddit post made by this guy, shout out to Lingo on Berry 3296, who actually traced that there's $2 billion in nonprofit grants and 45 states lobbying records to figure out who's behind the age verification bills, and it was actually Meta. They were using their money and vast resources to actually pay all of these corrupt politicians to go ahead and lobby for ID age verification throughout the world. Remember that the United States, unfortunately, in these types of situations, especially when it comes to ID age verification, is pretty influential. So when people are looking at the laws that the United States is implementing, it makes a lot of other countries want to do it too. And also the UK has also been very unfortunately influential in this regard too. The UK's Online Safety Act, and I believe it was 2023 or 2024, was actually one of the main catalysts to why there's so much ID age verification going around the world right now. And it has caused so many countries, states, cities, corporations, you name it, to all simultaneously go ahead and lobby for ID age verification. They want to push it all throughout the world, and they pretty much all use the exact same excuse. It is to protect the kids. Yes, hand over the IDs of your children and their biometric data, and also the IDs and biometric data of all the adults around the world, and they're doing it to protect the kids. And yet there have been so many data breaches. My channel has covered so many of them, but still they want everybody to go ahead and hand over an ID. I mean, it is just absolutely crazy. And most of these data breaches that you're seeing on screen, pretty much all of them have to do with ID age verification. So it just goes to show how little these guys care about the actual safety of everybody around the world and how flimsy their security is as well. You would think that if these companies want everyone to do ID age verification, they would at least try to make it a little safe, but it's not safe by design. They want everybody's information to get leaked. They want to go ahead and collect everybody's information and sell it to AI companies so they can train their models off of our data. That's just how it is around the world nowadays, and we got to make sure that we fight it and keep making noise about it, because otherwise these governments are going to think that everybody's okay with this. So in short, I'm glad that Meta is actually getting fined. Hopefully they get fined hundreds of billions of dollars, and hopefully they don't do all their shady activity anymore. But the EU Commission is not innocent in this. In fact, they are one of the worst organizations in the world with how hard they're pushing ID age verification. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on the situation in the comments. Please leave a like in the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. See ya.